Alrighty, so usually the first thing you need to know when entering any circle dance is to understand the spacing between people. You don't want to be so close to your neighbor that you're going to wind up stepping on their feet if you misstep or you stumble or something, or just when you're just trying to make a normal step. So what you want is a full arm length from your neighbor. So it's just a full arm length stretched out, whether it's all the way to your tips of your fingers, all the way out. That's usually just the general spacing that you need. Otherwise, what you need to also be aware of is of your steps that you're going to take, and that's usually within leg movements and stuff. Lots of people who are expressing themselves take huge big steps everywhere, and they don't realize what they're doing sometimes, and they'll either A, run into their neighbor, or B, they wind up putting this huge gap in the circle, and they get really close to their neighbor, which they'll have to fix, which there are. And that's the thing, if you ever happen to find yourself where you realized you've accidentally squished up, it's the spacing etiquette helps you to realize that you can also maybe have to slow down and make your steps smaller, just to get the spacing correct so you don't wind up running into somebody, or if you need to make an equally big step towards the other way to make sure you close the gap. So that's a thing. Be aware of your spacing within a circle, because you want to try to keep that arm's length from each of your neighbors. That way you're still close and you're dancing with them, but you also don't run the risk of literally running into them. So be aware of where you put your feet, how you step, how long you go, and that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's like there's another thing is when a second circle is made. When there's too many people in one circle that you're all squished together, a circle should be led. The second circle should be made by one of the more experienced dance leaders, not just somebody random, but it could be either the dance leader themselves or their second, or somebody who's a little bit more familiar with it. That way they can come in and create that extra spacing. Usually it's good to help who you need to grab. Usually it's the main dancers or one or two of your well-known trusted dancers to bring in that second one to create it. And then there's a few people sometimes that'll gravitate towards that, but you need to be aware that you need to probably be gesturing to a few people to start that one, at least to create that. Most people are at least aware of once the middle circle is to a certain width, they don't continue to join it. So that's always good. So that's just intuitive. Another time the second dance circle is created is when on certain songs or something there is specifically a men's circle inside a woman's circle in some more conservative synagogues, and not just like the Orthodox, because they'll keep them completely separated in different rooms or otherwise. But in more conservative ones, if that's another way of creating that second circle is if you have the girls, because in my experience I've seen a lot more girls than guys get up and dance, so the girls wind up being on the outside and the men wind up in the middle, and then they create their own circle. Usually it's the same dance if it's more or simpler, or even they have their own version if it's just two of them in the middle. So, but those are the two versions of etiquette when it comes to dancing a circle. If it's a guy wanting to join the inner circle, girls, just make sure you give them the space to run in there, or they'll run underneath your arms. Just be aware to, especially if your hands are being held, make sure your arms are up so they can just run out. So, and that's all you need to know for spacing. The whole point is literally to make sure that you keep the spaces between everybody even. Another one for spacing, because I've seen this a lot, especially if somebody is running too fast in one way or another, or they're not paying attention to where the circle is. Most circles are supposed to be a circle. When people aren't paying attention, they have a tendency to become ellipses or something, or if you're only having the space for ellipsis, that's fine. But if something happens where when you have the space for a nice big circle and everybody starts crunching in, they kind of almost make this weird elliptic or funky shape. If you're on one of those sections that you can tell is collapsing in, take initiative and try to lead others back into a more circular shape. And it just starts with just where you put your feet to help migrate and create that circle again, or else everybody's going to wind up squished together, stepping on each other's feet again. So just be aware of your spacing, your neighbor, and everybody. Make sure you don't overstep your boundaries with your feet, because that is where a lot of spacing issues can come into play, is how big or small your feet are. I usually try to keep my steps within about a shoulder's width worth of spacing. Sometimes a little bit larger if it happens to be a bigger step or I need to start moving in a different direction. But I try to keep them within my personal bubble, which is like either right outside my shoulders, so pretty much right outside my shoulders, or where my arms would usually be if I'm holding up. And we'll go over how to put your arms up when you're just holding your hands, but that's in a different series. But usually if you're holding your hands in this position, that's usually the spacing for your steps. And it helps you a lot with that, and you don't run into people. Alright, so now that you know your spacing etiquette, you can move on to something else, but that's how you can at least be aware of your spacing with etiquette within dance. And it's a very key aspect. Even if you can't quite grab everything else, spacing is a key issue. Just keep aware of that, and it helps you enjoy everything and nobody gets their feet stepped on or they get run into. It makes everything a lot more enjoyable that way.